We're learning more about the condition of Otto Warmbier, the American who returned to the U.S. Tuesday night after being imprisoned in North Korea for the last 15 months. His family says he returned in a coma. Warmbier suffered what hospital officials described as a severe neurological injury during his captivity.
His neurological condition can be best described as a state of unresponsive wakefulness. He has spontaneous eye opening and blinking. However, he shows no signs of understanding language, responding to verbal commands, or awareness of his surroundings. He has not spoken. He has not engaged in any purposeful movements or behaviors.
Doctors also say that Warmbier's family has not left his side since his return. Earlier, his father, Fred Warmbier, spoke to reporters.
I would like to highlight this morning the bittersweet feeling that my family has. Relief that Otto is now home in the arms of those who love him. And anger that he was so brutally treated for so long. We went for 15 months without a word from or about Otto. It was only a week ago that we were informed that the North Korean government now claims he was in a coma for almost all of that time. Even if you believe their explanation of botulism and a sleeping pill causing the coma, and we don't, there is no excuse for any civilized nation to have kept his condition secret and denied him top-notch medical care for so long.
For more on this, we bring in Isaac Stone-Fish. She's a senior fellow at the Asia Society Center on U.S.-China Relations. He's also a contributor for Foreign Policy magazine. Isaac, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Why now release this detained American, and why is he in a coma? That's unusual.
It is. The timing, getting released on Tuesday, the same time that Dennis Rodman arrived in Pyongyang, seems too strange to be a coincidence. Both Rodman and the National Security Council and the State Department have denied that the two trips have anything to do with each other. The student Warmbier leaving North Korea and Rodman arriving. But
you're suspicious of that?
It's just that them coming and going at the exact same time. It could be that the North Koreans wanted to pave the way for a smoother meeting with Rodman, whom it's possible to assume bears a message from Trump or from the U.S. government about talks between the two nations. But there's so much we don't really know right now, and so much surprising, like you said, about the coma. I mean, that's very shocking.
Typically, people who are released from North Korea show some sign of psychological distress, but not usually, or do they show sometimes physical distress, knowing how North Korea treats its own people?
Yeah, so of the roughly 15 Americans who have been known to have been detained in North Korea since 2009, most of them came out relatively unscathed. I think they suffered in prison in a psychological sense, but there's almost no other instances of this physical torture. So it's unclear whether or not North Korea decided to change its policy on imprisoned Americans and did actually torture Otto, or if he did fall prey to this illness, was in a coma, and the North Koreans just really didn't know what to do about it, so just kept him there.
And you see him in tears when he made his coerced confession. Let's listen here to his father, Fred, who spoke today and thanked the Trump administration for their efforts to secure his release. Let's listen to this.
Last evening, we received a very nice phone call from President Trump, who told us that Secretary of State Tillerson worked hard to help bring Otto home. We are extremely grateful for their efforts and concern.
What does his release say about the Trump foreign policy compared to the previous administration of President Obama? Because Fred, as you saw there, he's wearing his son's jacket as a sign of solidarity, thanked the president and the Secretary of State, but didn't really mention the previous administration by name or any specifics. Which administration gets the credit?
It's hard to know whether either administration deserves credit for his release, and if it was just a sign of the North Koreans that they are now ready to come back to the negotiation table, that they like to play this hot and cold, this very sophisticated game of brinksmanship, where they do things like detain an American and then, as a sign of goodwill, release him. So I don't know whether we can credit the Trump administration or blame the Obama administration. I do think we got to thank the State Department and a lot of the officials there for very quiet, sophisticated diplomacy between the two sides that made something like this happen.
Because the father essentially said the Obama administration advised the family to stay quiet, to allow them to do the work behind the scenes. And at a certain point, the family just couldn't take it anymore. And they gave interviews to print journalists and on television. And the father seemed to suggest that it had an impact in some way, shape, or form. Are you saying that North Korea just isn't that easy to read?
North Korea is one of the most difficult places to read in the world, and I think it's certainly possible that the interviews had an effect, like the father suggested. It's also certainly possible that North Korea is working entirely on its own timeline, and that they decided for some murky internal political reason that this was the moment that they wanted to release Otto, that this was the moment that they want something from the Americans, and they felt that this release was a way to pave the ground for future talks.
Now we
just
know
don't know now.
Kim Jong-un, as his father before him, wants to continue to develop a nuclear weapons program. Essentially, the rest of the world does not want that, yet they still test these ballistic missiles and fire them off. Sometimes they fail, sometimes they don't. But they also have 3 other Americans being held, despite these allegations of human rights abuses to its own people as well. So what is the benefit? How do they use these prisoners as bargaining chips?
Well, one way is purely financial. North Korea is a very, very poor country, and a lot of times the Americans who are released have to pay fines, sort of hotel stays or pay for the cost of their food, and it's not very much money, usually thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, but it's still something. It functions effectively as a bribe. More importantly, it's a way for North Korean domestic propaganda to say that top American officials are coming to North Korea to pay tribute to the North Korean leaders and to the North Korean system. So remember, President Bill Clinton, after he was out of office, flew in to rescue those 2 American journalists who were imprisoned there, and North Korean propaganda was able to use that and say, oh, this is Bill Clinton, formerly ran one of the world's most important countries, the top power, and he's now coming and paying respect to our great leader.
Right, he loves to be on the same level as influential leaders around the world and to show that.
Exactly.
Incredible. Isaac Stonefish, thanks for giving us a bit of an insight into a place we really don't know much about.
Thanks for having me.